Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. For this deep dive, we are jumping straight down the rabbit hole, the one Neo tumbled down, and using what might be the ultimate philosophical action film, The Matrix, as our launchpad. Our mission is to take that iconic choice, the red pill or the blue pill, and use it to explore these fundamental questions that they've tormented philosophers for millennia.
Questions like, what is the truth? What really defines a good life?
And maybe the most profound one, the one we're really going to get into, is the connection between divine knowledge and human freedom.
That's right. And our sources, they don't just review the film, they treat it as a foundational text for exploring classical philosophy, everything from Plato's Cave to modern skepticism and existentialism.
So we're really unpacking that terrifying possibility that our reality is just an illusion.
A concept formalized by Descartes. Yeah, we'll also get into the morality of choosing, blissful ignorance over a painful reality, which is all wrapped up in Cypher's choice.
And most critically, we are going to connect these ancient theological debates about God's absolute omniscience directly to this very thorny problem of human free will and fate.
It's the same maddening question. It's what drives the search for both the good life and the truth.
And the sources, they immediately draw this really powerful parallel between Neo, the digital rebel, and Socrates, the ultimate ancient provocateur.
And what's fascinating there is that the search for truth is inherently dangerous to the status quo. I mean, both men were persecuted for daring to question the system.
Right.
Socrates, the ancient philosopher, he faced charges of godlessness, of corrupting the youth, which led to his trial and eventually his death.
And Neo, he's a hacker. And the agents accuse him of breaking all the internet laws written in the law books.
It doesn't matter if it's 2,400 years ago or in some digital dystopia. The act of just asking hard questions, that itself brings you into direct conflict with established authority.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of Western inquiry then. Let's start with Socrates. His entire philosophical legacy really hinges on this persistent, almost irritating questioning, what we now call the Socratic method.
It wasn't just about sharing ideas, though. It was a deeply strategic process. It was designed to expose the other person's lack of genuine knowledge.
So it's a kind of intellectual combat.
In a way, yeah. The Socratic method, as the sources detail it, is this process of relentless interrogation. Socrates would take a seemingly simple concept, like justice or holiness, and he'd ask a respected citizen, what is X?
And the person would give an answer they thought was solid.
Right. But then Socrates would ask a series of follow-up questions until that definition just crumbled. He'd lead the person to contradict themselves or finally to admit they didn't really know what they were talking about in the first place.
That must have been infuriating for them.
Oh, for the elite. Absolutely. This is why he was so popular among the youth who, loved watching the powerful squirm. But he was hated by the authorities who depended on this appearance of wisdom. He was disturbing the peace of Athens.
And that disturbance leads directly to the most famous story about him, right? The oracle at Delphi.
It does. His friend, Chaerephon, travels to Delphi to ask Apollo's priestess if anyone in the world was wiser than Socrates. And the oracle's response was definitive. No one was wiser.
So how does Socrates, the man who famously claimed he knew nothing, how does he react to being told he's the wisest man in the world?
He's genuinely shocked. He's bordering on disbelief. He famously said something like, God, what are you saying? What is the hidden meaning here? I know I possess little or no wisdom.
So he didn't just accept it?
No, not at all. He took it as a personal philosophical challenge. He actually set out to disprove the oracle.
And how did he go about trying to do that?
Well, he went on a mission. He interviewed the politicians who claimed to govern with wisdom. He talked to the playwrights who claimed to have this deep understanding of the human condition. And he questioned the master craftsmen who are experts in their trades.
His goal being to find someone, anyone, who was truly wise.
Exactly. So he could go back to the oracle and say, look, this man is wiser than I am. You were wrong.
But the irony, and this is really the core of Socratic wisdom, was revealed in that very investigation.
It's a powerful irony. He found that the politicians, they thought they knew great things, but actually knew very little. The playwrights and craftsmen, they were wise, but only in their specific craft. Yet they thought that expertise extended to everything else, like morality or how to run a city.
And Socrates realized.
He realized he was paradoxically the wisest because he alone knew the extent of his own ignorance. While everyone else mistakenly thought they knew so much, Socrates knew that he knew nothing.
He didn't claim to have wisdom. He just recognized the absence of it. I mean, that's a radical inversion of authority, isn't it?
Absolutely. And his mission then became clear to him: to interrogate his fellow citizens, to expose their presumed wisdom as a kind of ignorance, and in doing so, wake them up.
Which is very much like what Morpheus does with Neo.
It is. It makes that gadfly analogy so perfect. Socrates saw himself as a gadfly, stinging a great sluggish horse, that was Athens, to spur it into self-reflection and, necessary action.
And Morpheus is the ultimate cyber gadfly, just trying to wake up a sleeping civilization that's become far too comfortable in its ignorance.
And the oracles themselves offer this fascinating contrast. The ancient Delphi oracle, she spoke in vague, confusing poetry, which was then interpreted by a priest. It often led to these tragic errors, like the prophecy given to King Croesus.
Right, he was told a great kingdom would be destroyed, and it ended up being his own.
Exactly. He didn't have the wisdom to handle the truth.
And the Matrix's oracle? She's completely different. She's a contemporary figure, a grandmotherly black woman. She's baking cookies, smoking a cigarette, meeting Neo face-to-face in her kitchen.
But for all the modern setting, the nature of the advice is still elusive. It's still open to interpretation. Her first line is, "Not quite what you expected, huh?"
It's the same game.
It is. The ancient legends said the vapors at Delphi stopped because people misused the privilege. They weren't ready. The wisdom of know thyself and nothing in excess was a prerequisite to handle the truth. So both oracles, ancient or digital, they serve as these necessary gatekeepers to a truth that is both essential and potentially destructive.
So the journey from being told you're wise to realizing your ignorance, that leads us right to the ultimate philosophical metaphor for being plugged into the Matrix, Plato's allegory of the cave.
This allegory from Plato's Republic, it is the foundational premise for the entire film. Imagine prisoners who have been chained in an underground cave since they were children.
And they can only face a wall.
Right. Behind them, a fire burns, and people are walking between that fire and the prisoners, casting shadows on the wall in front of them.
So the prisoners mistake those shadows, that illusion,
Yeah.
for their ultimate reality.
And crucially, the firelight behind them is the best light available inside the cave. But it's not the sun. The sun is outside, and it's the source of all true good and knowledge.
And the prisoners? They don't know they're imprisoned. They don't even want to escape because that reality, the shadows, it feels complete to them.
Yes, exactly.
So when Neo is extracted from his pod, that moment, Morpheus tells him, "You are a slave, Neo, a prison for your mind." It's the perfect parallel to a prisoner being freed and literally dragged out of the cave.
And that awakening is intensely painful. The freed prisoner, when he first sees the sun, is completely blinded by it.
Which is why Neo asks, "Why do my eyes hurt?"
And Morpheus gives that classic Platonic reply, "Because you've never used them before." The journey out of the cave, the education, is a slow, painful process of adjusting to the blinding brilliance of truth.
But the burden of knowledge doesn't just end with your eyes adjusting. The freed prisoner, like Neo, feels this moral obligation to go back to the cave, back into the Matrix, to tell the others.
And what happens when he does?
He's met with ridicule, disbelief, or even violence.
Right. Those still chained would think he's gone mad, or that the outside world ruined his eyes. The sources bring up Achilles, who says from the underworld that he would rather be a slave for a poor man on earth than rule over all the dead.
The painful truth is always preferable to the pleasant illusion, at least for those who value authenticity.
Always.
So if the shadows are the illusion, what does the sun outside the cave represent in the deepest sense of the allegory?
The sun represents the Platonic forms. Plato argued that everything we experience through our senses, a beautiful sunset, a kind act, a perfect circle you try to draw, is merely a poor imitation, a copy of a higher, perfect, transcendent level of reality.
The realm of the forms.
The realm of the perfect form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of goodness itself, these are the true realities.
So the red pill isn't just about choosing a new, grittier reality. It's a commitment to a terrifying search for those perfect underlying forms, the fundamental truth that goes way beyond our flawed sensory world.
Precisely. It's a rejection of sensory data as the highest authority. The moment Neo takes that red pill, he rejects the comfortable sensory input of the Matrix and commits himself to pursuing that transcendent reality of the forms, which he can only access through, painful intellectual and moral effort.
The moment we accept that our senses might be deceiving us, we move from the ancient cave to a more modern philosophical prison. Radical skepticism. And the architect of this prison is René Descartes.
Yes, Descartes provides the formal philosophical framework for what we could call the matrix possibility,
Which is?
skepticism. The idea that we can never be absolutely certain that the external world even exists. Descartes was looking for a foundation, something of absolute, undeniable certainty upon which he could build all knowledge.
So he developed what's called methodological doubt. This wasn't just, casual uncertainty. It was a systematic, temporary, but absolutely ruthless process.
It was. It was designed to discard any belief that could possibly be doubted, no matter how remote the possibility of error.
And the first thing to go, naturally, is our sensory data.
Of course, we rely on our senses constantly. I see a cup of water, I trust it's there. But Descartes noted that sometimes our senses are deceptive, especially with things that are small or far away.
Like a square tower looking round from a distance.
Or a stick in water that looks bent. And because the senses betray us even once, they just don't meet his incredibly high standard of absolute certainty. So we have to discard them. All of them.
But the doubt gets much more radical than that, because even if I'm standing right here looking at my own hands, I could still be wrong.
And that's the dream argument. Even the most reliable, immediate beliefs that I am sitting here, that I'm wearing clothes, holding a script, all of that can be doubted because we could be dreaming all of it.
Morpheus uses that exact point on Neo.
He does. Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that was so real? What if you couldn't wake up? How would you know the difference?
And that question is so haunting because in the moment of the dream, it feels just as real as waking life. You only realize it was false after you wake up.
And Descartes takes one final terrifying step, which is the exact parallel to the machine simulation, the evil demon.
Okay, tell us more about the evil demon.
So if we can doubt our senses and even doubt whether we're awake, the ultimate extension of this doubt is this. What if an all-powerful malicious spirit, or in the Matrix context, a supercomputer system, is using electrical signals to feed us illusions?
A demon lying to us about literally everything.
Everything. The sky, the chair you're sitting on, the laws of physics. We cannot logically rule out the possibility that such a system exists, which means we cannot have absolute certainty about the existence of the external world.
So the evil demon, or the Matrix, it establishes this logical firewall. I can know that I'm thinking, the famous cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, but I can't know for sure that anything external to my mind exists.
Precisely. You are certain you are a thinking entity, but everything you perceive could be a carefully crafted lie. That is the logical starting point for the Matrix itself.
And philosophers didn't just leave that demon in the 17th century. They modernized him. Peter Unger introduced the evil scientist scenario in 1975.
Right, replacing the demon with technology. Unger imagined a super brain specialist who uses electrodes connected directly to our nervous system and a computer to feed us these elaborate, finely wrought illusions.
So the scientist convinces us that chairs and books exist when they actually don't.
And Unger's claim is this. We can never know with absolute certainty that such an evil scientist does not exist. And if we can't rule out that possibility, we can't be certain of anything external.
And then Hilary Putnam took this a step further in 1981, removing the need for a body entirely with the famous brain in a vat thought experiment.
In Putnam's version, your brain has been surgically removed from your body. It's placed in a jar of nourishing chemicals, and it's stimulated by a powerful computer.
A computer so sophisticated it creates the illusion of a full life. You think you're playing tennis, drinking coffee.
Right. If your brain decides to get up and get a snack, the computer simulates the entire experience of walking to the kitchen and eating.
But you are still just a floating brain in a jar, completely unaware of the real, unsimulated situation. This is the exact condition of the millions of humans floating in the pods of the Matrix.
And the question just remains, hanging over us like the sword of Damocles. How do you know that you are not a brain in a vat? We might feel certain, but we can't logically disprove the possibility.
The takeaway from this high-level skepticism, then, is that it really forces us to define what we even mean by knowledge. Because if the standard is that Cartesian level of certainty, we know virtually nothing.
That is the essential critique. Descartes demands a form of super-knowledge, knowledge that is impossible to be wrong about. And the logical extension of that demand is just, well, it's nihilism. We can know almost nothing at all.
And isn't the skeptic's principle itself kind of self-undermining? The claim is, only absolutely certain knowledge is knowledge. But for that claim to hold any weight, the skeptic has to be absolutely certain that knowledge requires certainty.
Exactly. It's a paradox. And furthermore, we rely on what we could call ordinary knowledge constantly. We know where we're sitting, what the weather is like. We navigate the world effectively using our senses and reason.
If we had to achieve super knowledge before we could trust any belief, We couldn't even read the skeptical arguments themselves.
So the counterargument says we just have to reject that demand for absolute certainty. We should operate on the basis of pragmatic knowledge instead.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It means instead of possibility, we focus on probability. The possibility that the matrix exists isn't the primary issue. The issue is how probable it is. We are justified in believing things, and thus knowing things, unless someone proves our beliefs are highly probable to be false.
The time-telling analogy is perfect for this. If someone asks you the time, you look at your watch and say, it's 12:30. You admit the watch might have stopped, but unless you have strong evidence that it's been malfunctioning recently, you still know the time.
You're operating on ordinary knowledge, which admits the possibility of error, but not the high probability of error. The existence of the matrix possibility doesn't invalidate the vast amounts of ordinary knowledge we rely on every single day.
So the choice between the red pill, the painful truth, and the blue pill, the blissful illusion, that shifts the conversation from epistemology, what can we know, to morality, how should we live?
Yeah.
And Cypher's betrayal is the ultimate case study in hedonism.
That scene in the restaurant is unforgettable. Cypher is chewing on that phantom steak, and he confesses his realization after 9 years of fighting in the real world, the desert of the real.
And he says, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
He makes the deal. Plug me back in, make me rich, make me forget all of this. He chooses comfort, sensory pleasure, self-importance, all over the painful, authentic reality of Zion.
He's fully embracing hedonism.
He is. It's the philosophical doctrine that the only thing intrinsically valuable is pleasure or happiness. For Cypher, if reality is only sensory input, then why does the source even matter? If the matrix can provide a more vivid, more enjoyable sensory experience, a better steak, a better life, then morally, he thinks he should choose the illusion.
But this raises that critical question. If Cypher is just seeking pleasure, how does philosophy prove that his simulated pleasure is less valuable than Neo's painful truth? What is the actual moral error here?
The moral error lies in equating pleasure with a life that is worth living. Philosophy argues that there is something more fundamentally valuable than just mere experience, and the greatest philosophical weapon against Cypher's choice is Robert Nozick's experience machine.
Okay, let's talk about Nozick's thought experiment from anarchy, state, and utopia. It feels like it was designed specifically to dismantle Cypher's whole justification.
It was. Nozick asks you, the listener, to imagine a machine far more advanced than the Matrix that can simulate every single desirable experience perfectly. Writing a great novel, winning an Olympic medal, having profound love, the machine gives you flawless, intense pleasure.
And you could program 2 years of perfect experiences, plug in, and completely forget you were in the machine.
And the ultimate question is, would you choose to plug into this machine for life? Cypher would rush to plug in, but Nozick argues that most people would and should decline because we value things other than mere pleasurable experience.
And he gives 3 crucial reasons why we value the red pill over the blue pill. The first is the value of doing versus experiencing.
Yes, we don't just want the experience of writing a great book. We want to actually write it. We want to do the brave act, not just feel the sensation of bravery.
So the experience machine and the matrix, they only provide the appearance of meaningful action. And that's not enough for a moral life.
Exactly. Even if the illusion of success is perfect, the lack of real agency, the lack of doing, makes it empty.
And the second reason?
The second reason is that we value being a certain person. Nozick argues that being plugged into a tank makes you an indeterminate blob of flesh. You're passive, you can't choose or strive or sacrifice, you can't genuinely be called brave or witty or loving because those virtues require real-world actions and challenges, not the passive reception of sensory stimuli programmed by a machine.
You just become a recipient of sensation, not an agent of action. The true self is lost.
And the third reason is the fundamental desire for contact with deeper reality. We want to connect with the actual world, the unsimulated truth, even if that truth is hard. Cypher wanted to forget the desert of the real, but our intrinsic drive is to seek the real, even the painful real. And this quest for authentic reality outweighs the allure of simulated pleasure.
Nozick effectively proves that the red pill choice, the choice for reality, is grounded in morality, not just, curiosity.
And Cypher fundamentally confuses 2 different states of being here: active happiness and passive contentment. Contentment is merely the absence of unsatisfied desires. It's a state achieved by just neutralizing desire itself. But that's not true happiness.
So let's delve into those 4 specific examples our sources offer to show why ignorance is bliss is philosophically false.
Okay, first, consider a hypothetical drug called ataraxy, which means a state of serene freedom from disturbance. Imagine you take this drug and you become perpetually numb and content, just spending your days passively watching TV, having forgotten you ever took it.
It sounds peaceful, but it's completely empty.
It's artificial contentment. It lacks any personal achievement or striving. No meaningful human life could be built on a constant state of chemically induced numbness.
Okay, and the second point.
Second, the illusion is inherently fragile. Self-deception, which is the foundation of Cypher's choice, is unstable. You might dream of being rich and eating caviar, but reality occasionally intrudes. Your body, the unsimulated part, might suddenly give you painful feedback.
And more terrifyingly, the unseen reality like an agent appearing behind you can still hurt you. Ignorance is not a real shield.
No, it's not. Third, look at Othello. After he's convinced his wife Desdemona has betrayed him, he cries out, "Farewell the tranquil mind! Farewell content." He thinks he would have been happier remaining ignorant.
But the dramatic irony of the tragedy is that he would have been infinitely happier had he known the painful truth, that the betrayal was a complete lie engineered by Iago.
Exactly. Clinging to the false belief drives him to commit murder and suicide. The truth, even when it's difficult, is superior to a comforting lie.
And finally, the alcoholic escape.
The drunk achieves a temporary state of pleasure and contentment while intoxicated, but that contentment is just an escape. The cold light of sobriety always reveals that it was a flight from a fundamental unhappiness and emptiness in the real world. That flight is inauthentic. It's avoidance, not a solution.
So Aristotelian philosophy gives us a different definition of happiness, eudaimonia.
It does. It's defined as energia, which is active work aligned with our ekis excellence or virtue. Neo's choice to seek truth is an active pursuit that requires moral virtue. Cypher's choice is a passive escapism seeking mere sensation.
This is where we delve into the theological maze. If external forces, whether it's a machine oracle or an omniscient God know the future, then the future is determined, and human freedom seems completely impossible.
This links technological determinism directly to the classical theological problem of absolute omniscience. The moment the Oracle confirms Neo's status as a potential chosen one, she introduces this deep anxiety of destiny, of fate.
And we see this problem so clearly in ancient mythology. The prophecy to King Croesus, who misinterprets the warning and destroys his own kingdom.
Or the tragedy of Oedipus, who tries desperately to escape the prophecy that he will kill his father and marry his mother, yet achieves exactly what was foretold. Fate ruled their lives.
This brings us to the historic Christian dilemma. How can a God be omniscient, all-knowing, and humans still possess free will? If God knows everything we will do, it feels like we have no choice but to follow that script.
The philosopher Boethius, writing in the 6th century, he tackled this head-on. If an all-knowing being knows something will happen, it must happen. Why? Because one cannot know a falsehood. Knowledge necessitates certainty.
And if that event must happen, if it's inevitable because it's foreknown, then no one is free to prevent it.
That's Boethius's conclusion. And the prevailing challenge, the price of absolute omniscience, seems to be the loss of human freedom.
John Calvin, the great reformer, he embraced this conclusion completely and pushed it toward predestination.
Yeah.
How did he frame this idea of timeless knowledge?
Calvin argued that since God exists outside of time, God sees our entire lives, past, present, and future, laid out like a developed film strip. Therefore, every single event is determined because God's knowledge of it is timeless and immutable.
Which led to his doctrine of predestination.
It did. Some are destined for heaven, some for eternal damnation, and our actions in the moment cannot change this pre-established reality.
But that feels completely unfair, and it seems to remove all moral responsibility. If I am determined to betray the group, like Cypher was, how can I possibly be held accountable for that?
Exactly, and Calvin refutes that common objection, the idea that God merely knows what we will choose, but doesn't choose for us. Calvin insists that if we are only free when we can avoid doing something, and God foreknows our action, then the action is unavoidable and thus not free.
If the Oracle knows Neo is the one, he has no choice but to follow the predetermined path of the one.
That's the deterministic view.
So if we shift away from divine knowledge, we still face the exact same problem, but framed by physics and cause and effect. We move from God's omniscience to Laplace's demon.
Laplace's demon is a thought experiment from the 18th century, and it represents pure scientific determinism. The play suggested that if an intellect, the theoretical demon, knew the exact state and position of every single particle in the universe at any given moment,
And all the natural laws governing them.
it could precisely calculate the entire future of the universe.
This relies on that core principle of causal determinism. Every event has a cause, and the same cause always yields the same result. If that's true, then the universe is just a gigantic machine running on clockwork rules, and there's only one possible future.
Which means free will is an illusion.
And the consequence for human life is profound.
It is. In a completely determined world, no one is truly responsible for their actions because nothing they do is a matter of their own initiative. The psychologist B.F. Skinner argued that if our behaviors are fundamentally determined by external forces, our genetics and our environment, then we have to abandon the whole notion of free will.
And with it, the corresponding notions of punishment, reward, right and wrong.
We simply react to external stimuli.
So whether it's by the hand of an omniscient God or the calculation of a scientific demon, the verdict on free will seems equally grim. Is there a counter-argument that preserves human agency?
There is. The ancient philosopher Epicurus, he countered this absolute determination by suggesting that atoms swerve randomly, introducing a small, unpredictable chance element that he thought was necessary for free will.
And modern physics offers a parallel to that, doesn't it?
It does. Quantum physics suggests that at the subatomic level, some events, like the exact moment of radioactive decay, are truly random or causeless in a classical sense. This suggests the universe isn't a completely predictable clockwork machine.
Which opens a small door for freedom.
A small door, yes. Though philosophers still debate whether quantum randomness is the same thing as free human agency.
What about the oracle's role in all this? If she isn't purely omniscient, maybe she's not a deterministic force at all.
Exactly. The sources suggest a really compelling alternative. Perhaps the oracle doesn't predict the future. She shapes it.
Her prophecies are self-fulfilling.
They can be, yes. They rely on the belief and actions of those who consult her. By telling Neo he's not the one, she sets him on a path of necessary self-discovery and action that ultimately makes him the one. Her power lies in the psychological expectation she creates, not in some immutable universal law.
The search for reality and self-determination takes a sharp turn toward Eastern philosophy in one of the most famous scenes, the no-spoon encounter. When Neo is waiting for the oracle, the young boy tells him, "Do not try to bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, try to realize the truth. There is no spoon. Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, but only yourself."
It's a perfect Zen parallel. The sources highlight core Buddhist concepts here. First, Anicca impermanence. Everything changes, nothing is constant. The spoon is constantly changing.
And second, and this is the really central idea,
Anatman, the idea that there is no permanent, independent self or soul. Our suffering, according to Buddhism, comes from clinging to the illusion of a continuous, separate self.
so if the self is an illusion, what is doing the bending?
Only the mind. When Neo understands there is no separate spoon and no separate self, the boundaries between the subjective and the objective world begin to dissolve. The mind, liberated from the illusion of form, is able to manipulate the simulation.
And this concept of interconnectedness, the idea that our actions affect everything, is reinforced by the metaphor of the mirror that the Buddha himself used.
Yes, the Buddha taught his son Rahula using a mirror. He taught that any action must be preceded by careful reflection, like looking in a mirror. You must contemplate the effect of your actions on all interconnected things.
A concept known as pratityasampada.
Dependent co-origination. Nothing exists independently. Everything is interwoven. Therefore, you must act in a way that minimizes harm to yourself and others.
But despite these very clear Zen themes, the illusion of the self, the focus on inner transformation, we can't simply label The Matrix a purely Buddhist film, can we? There are some significant philosophical clashes.
Oh, absolutely. 3 major clashes stand out. First, the film is structured around a Zoroastrian dualism, this absolute violent fight between good, which is Zion, and evil, the machines and the agents.
Which contradicts core Buddhist virtues.
Completely. It contradicts karuna, which is compassion, and metta, loving kindness, which should be extended toward all sentient beings, including your enemies. The focus should be on ending suffering, not perpetuating a dualistic war.
And second, there's the excessive violence. Neo demanding guns, lots of guns.
That directly contradicts the Buddhist aversion to harm, ahimsa. A bodhisattva, who is someone who returns to guide others, is dedicated to reducing suffering, not adding new suffering through wholesale slaughter.
And the third point is smaller, but still relevant.
The coarse language. It violates the right speech component of the Eightfold Path. So while the film borrows heavily from Zen, Neo's path is ultimately one of violent moral intervention, which departs pretty significantly from the Buddhist path of non-harming enlightenment.
The entire film is this deep exploration of metaphysics, the branch of philosophy that tries to establish a consistent, comprehensive worldview, trying to answer, what is the nature of reality?
And metaphysics is different from specialized sciences, which only focus on specific areas like physics or astronomy, and it's different from theology, which relies on faith and authority beyond natural reason. Metaphysics seeks rational consistency.
In classifying reality, our sources detail three main categories within the film's structure. Only one is explicitly named by the characters. Mind, which includes the consciousness of Neo, Trinity, and, well, you listening.
The second is non-mind. This includes the machines, the bodies and the pods, the physical world of Zion, and the third is composites, which are human beings, the union of body and mind.
And the film emphasizes this union constantly, most dramatically when Morpheus says that dying in the Matrix means you die in the real world.
The body cannot live without the mind. The connection is absolutely vital.
And then we have the categories of unreality, the illusionary world created by the simulation.
These include the neurointeractive simulation itself, images, digital identities, dreams, appearances, the matrix. The distinction is key. Reality directly affects unreality. The machines built the matrix. But unreality only affects reality if the mind gets confused and accepts the illusion as real.
If Neo's mind accepts virtual death, his physical body dies.
And if the mind accepts the virtual oracle, her prophecies gain power. The power of the illusion rests entirely on the mind's perception and trust.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of our modern society, the sources analyze the Matrix through the lens of postmodern theory, particularly the work of Jean Baudrillard and Slavoj Žižek.
Yes, and they highlight how technology has blurred the line between the real and the simulated in our own lives.
Baudrillard's idea of simulacra is central here. We live in a world that is saturated with representations, images, language, media. Life becomes a social relation mediated by images, a spectacle, where the immediate reality of the material world is overridden by its representation.
And this leads to the hyperreal. The simulation doesn't just copy reality, it can enhance it. The Matrix produces a 1999 world that is brighter, cleaner, and tastier than the dreary, post-apocalyptic 2199 world of Zion.
The artificial banana flavor, in theory, tastes better than the real banana. A simulation of the Grand Canyon might be superior to the physical trip.
It forces us to question the supremacy of the unsimulated world. Is the truth worth the pain if the lie feels better?
And Žižek's critique focuses on the disintegration of the big other. What exactly is this big other?
It represents the domain of shared objective common sense, the consensus reality, the collective authority, the symbolic foundation for truth that everyone agrees upon. In past eras, religious or political authority served as the big other.
And today that foundation is dissolving because knowledge has become so complex.
Precisely. Experts speak this specialized jargon, quantum physics, economics, advanced computer science, that can no longer be translated back into a common sense or a shared, unified worldview. Scientific knowledge may touch the real, as he puts it, but it can't serve as a symbolic foundation for how the average person organizes their life.
Which forces people to operate in radically incompatible worldviews at the same time.
Yes, the sources give this powerful example of the Indian computer programmer. During the day, he works proficiently in his high-tech field, dealing with objective, rational code. But at night, he lights candles to a holy cow at the neighborhood temple, operating in a profoundly religious cultural reality.
His objective scientific knowledge and his subjective religious reality just exist side by side without reconciliation.
Because the big other that would unite them has disintegrated.
And the ultimate philosophical consequence of that.
Žižek argues this creates a world where the very notion of reality itself becomes paranoid. It's not just that conspiracy theories are the product of crazy people. It is that reality itself, due to this irreconcilable gap between expert knowledge and common sense, is becoming inherently paranoid and unstable. You are justified in questioning consensus because consensus no longer holds.
So Neo's choice of the red pill, that choice for truth and freedom, is fundamentally an existential choice.
It is. Existentialism holds that individuals, not external powers like fate or God or the machines, are the ones who assign order and meaning to the world through their choices.
The price of the red pill, the authentic life, is steep. Anxiety, social dislocation, maybe even madness. But the price of the blue pill, the inauthentic life, is the complete loss of personal autonomy and self-determination.
And this is where Immanuel Kant provides a necessary moral foundation. For Kant, the only thing that is intrinsically good in and of itself, is the capacity for rational choice, the goodwill.
So happiness, the pleasure Cypher was seeking, isn't determined by passive experiences, but by the choices you make.
Even if your attempt to do the right thing fails, the moral worth resides in the intention and the active striving of the goodwill. This leads to Kant's definition of the highest good.
Which is a world that is not just happy, but deserving of happiness.
Yes, a world where happiness is earned through free, responsible actions. And this provides the moral context for the machine's ultimate design flaw.
When Agent Smith admits the first version of the Matrix was a perfect world, a perfect human world.
The flaw wasn't in the programming. The flaw was the human spirit itself. Humans instinctively rejected that passive, unearned, ideal happiness because they define their reality through struggle, through difference, and through the ability to earn their own outcomes. Unearned happiness is a form of enslavement, and humanity demanded the freedom to achieve or fail on its own terms.
So the moral life requires action and striving. But if determinism, whether it's divine or scientific, is true, how can we be sure our choices are even real?
Kant argues that the moral quest demands three things we must assume or believe in, even if we can't scientifically prove them. These are Kant's postulates of morality.
And the first postulate is freedom.
We must assume we are free to choose. Science may explain our actions through deterministic physical and psychological laws, but the essence of moral experience is its non-deterministic nature. If we cannot believe we are free, morality collapses and responsibility dissolves. We must postulate freedom to act morally.
The second postulate is central to the dilemma we discussed earlier, and it's God. But Kant's idea of God is very specific. It's not the traditional external God who hands out rewards and punishment.
No, Kant posits that we must assume that free individuals united in a collective moral oneness possess the power to realize the highest good in this world.
So if human separation creates the world of external hostile power, the machines, the system, then moral unity must create a radically different world, like Zion.
And Kant names this necessary collective moral power the postulate of God.
So we assume this unifying force exists not as a matter of religious faith, but as a philosophical requirement to ensure that the highest good is even a rational possibility. Without it, the moral task is hopeless.
And the third postulate is immortality. We must assume some form of this worldly immortality, perhaps the cycle of rebirth or reincarnation, which the Oracle hints at with Neo, in order to fully realize the moral task over time. The moral task of achieving the highest good is simply too vast for a single, finite lifetime.
These postulates demonstrate a crucial shift, then. The quest for truth isn't just about finding an external, verifiable fact. It's about committing to a system of belief that enables us to live a meaningful, moral life.
The belief in freedom, God as collective moral unity, and immortality are necessary articles of faith to ensure the moral life doesn't collapse into despair or nihilism.
And the machine's design flaw, that humans demanded struggle, that's the key to understanding the film's climax.
It is. Neo's ultimate freedom is not just to see the truth, but to shape the truth itself.
When he can bend the virtual reality of the Matrix, he demonstrates that the power of the authentic human mind is greater than the simulation. The spoon doesn't bend. The world bends around the self.
And his final promise to the machines is a promise of cosmic moral revolution, synthesizing Kant's desire for a morally earned world.
I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you, a world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries, a world where anything is possible.
Neo realizes that true freedom is the power of creation. It's the power to realize the highest good by rejecting external control and embracing the terrifying, exhilarating burden of autonomy.
This deep dive took us from the persecution of Socrates all the way to the chaos of the postmodern era, all framed by Neo's single choice.
We've established that skepticism, from Descartes' evil dumb to the brain in a vat, it forces us to define what we accept as knowledge.
Is it the absolute certainty of super-knowledge or the pragmatic, highly probable standard of ordinary knowledge?
Morally, Cypher's choice for the blue pill, that hedonistic illusion and passive contentment, is refuted by Nozick's experience machine. We value doing and being, authentic action and virtue, more than the mere experience of pleasure.
And finally, the debate over free will, whether it's framed by God's absolute omniscience and the dilemma of predestination, or by the rigid rules of scientific determinism embodied by Laplace's demon, that remains absolutely central to human identity and responsibility.
And the path to freedom requires us to solve this riddle, or at least to choose to believe we have the power to solve it.
The search for truth is not passive, it's an active commitment.
And if we accept that the moral life requires us to postulate freedom, God is the unity of moral purpose and immortality, as Kant suggested, this means that the search for truth is less about finding a verifiable, rock-solid fact external to ourselves, and more about committing to a system of belief that enables us to live a meaningful moral life.
So the ultimate question isn't whether the truth is real.
But whether your commitment to truth is strong enough to shape reality.